Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Peak Growth Podcast. Today, I have with me Farhan, and we're going to discuss about his company called Comidemy. Welcome, Farhan.
Thanks for having me, Gabriel.
So, can you begin by giving us a quick introduction about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a solopreneur in the education technology space. I've been working at the intersection of digital learning, online training, e-learning, all those kinds of things for almost 15 years, and decided about a year ago to launch my own consultancy. So I've been a solopreneur since June of 2024.
Interesting. And what was the thing that first pulled you into solopreneurship?
Honestly, it was being able to see trends in the industry that I felt I had accumulated a lot of skills to be able to address, and really being able to kind of find those key areas where I could provide value.
Amazing. And you told me that at the beginning of your solopreneur journey, you were servicing one kind of client, and then at some point you decided to do a fundamental pivot. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the areas that I found a lot of interest in initially when I launched the company was how do I help individual experts monetize their expertise? We live in a creator economy. It's never been easier to actually put your expertise out there, right? And as we can see, we live in a generation in which social media rules our lives in many ways, right? I thought I could really provide a big boost to people who don't know how to actually turn their expertise into either a side hustle or some way of being able to monetize their success. And it was an interesting ride. Definitely can say that I learned a lot about the space. Where I eventually decided to take myself was moving away from those solopreneurs and experts to teams that are kind of hypercharged and in that fast growth phase where learning can provide more of that business value. I think the fundamental shift came from for an expert, for many experts, they're making a living doing what they do best. They travel the world, they do workshops, they do seminars, etc. And this idea of monetizing your expertise digitally was a nice to have. It wasn't mission critical, right? And I realized that in order for me to be able to provide value and find satisfaction in my work, I wanted to move away from the nice to have to something that is more mission critical. And that's what led me to the pivot.
Can you give us more details about the kind of companies you work with today? What's your ideal collaboration? How does it look like?
Absolutely. So my ideal partner is scale up 5 to 100 employees in that rapid kind of hockey stick growth phase where they know that they need to train, they need to build people fast, efficiently, and in a way that's very scalable. So whether that's their internal teams that need to be onboarded and brought up to speed, or whether it's their customers that are now learning a new software, learning a new service, both of those pieces of the pie are areas that I have a lot of experience building. I mean, primarily I would say SaaS or technology companies within that 5 to 100 employee scale up bracket, but it could be other organizations as well. I just had a call with a prospect who runs a school and he has about 150 students in his school. So that's a little bit beyond that initial bracket that I had outlined, but it's still very valuable in terms of we have a need and we have a small population that really needs to be brought up to speed.
Right, that's interesting. So he runs a physical school?
He runs a physical school, yeah. So this in this particular instance, it's a school K through 12 kind of institute, but they operate like a startup, which is nice, right? It's very iterative and they're looking for fast growth and they don't have a learning ecosystem as of yet for their.
Okay, all right. Well, are some trends that you are currently watching in the education space right now, especially on the tech or online side?
Yeah, there's a lot going on with the emerging technology, AI, disruption that's taking every industry by storm. I think fundamentally in the education space, it's come down to how do we best harness this amazing technology without losing the human touch, right? Even on the podcasts that I have hosted and folks that I've talked to over the last year, that seems to be one of the key trends that's emerging is we have almost unparalleled access to information, right? Within just a few seconds, you're able to generate content and organize content and, curate content with sources. But how do you serve that up, right? People are not going to just read scrolls and scrolls of a message, right? How do you serve up information in a way that's engaging, that is going to be accessible, right? And lead to fundamental outcomes for whoever it is that you're, designing for. So integrating that human element into the otherwise technology-filled world that we operate in, that's the key in terms of, I think, where the future is headed.
Yeah, so um, you said that we have all this information at our fingertips, and potentially that would make it easier for anyone to learn what they want to learn, right? And to get that transformation they desire. But what I've seen so far is that the more information is available out there, it actually can become a bit more difficult to learn as a novice without the human touch, because you don't know what to pick when you don't know what's actually going to get you results, right? There's a lot of information out there in forms of AI or YouTube videos or maybe articles or all things like that, but there's so much contradictory information that I think there's a lot of confusion in the education space right now. And one of the big challenges for companies who operate inside this industry is to create clarity for their potential students. So I'm curious, how do you guys approach that?
Yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head, Gabriel. There's so much that actually still needs to be engineered from a best practice standpoint with regards to how we sift through the noise, because that's what we have. Right now, we have a ton of noise, right? If you're not smart about how you're curating the information that is fundamentally going to go into your learning experience, then you're already kind of setting yourself up for failure, right? So, what are some of the principles that I use? Number one, you have to define your outcomes. And it's not one of the things that I recently had a conversation with someone about is, we're used to traditionally thinking about learning having objectives. Okay. By the end of this module, you will blank, right? That's the historical viewpoint, right? Where the author or the instructor has kind of set out these particular things that they believe you should achieve, right? But it's not taking it from the learner standpoint, which is outcomes. What will I be able to do ideally after going through this experience? So define your outcomes. That's the first thing, right? Learning should be performance based. It should have an active component and it should be applicable in the real world. That's what leads to behavior change, right? For to a certain extent, learning can be informational. It can just be knowledge. Okay. Somebody rattles off all the capitals of the countries in Europe. Fantastic. Okay. That's great for trivia. But is that applicable in the real world? Perhaps not, right? So connecting knowledge into real world applications and outcomes so that the information is actually being applied and put to the test, that's what's fundamentally important. It's being able to connect the knowledge into those outcomes, real world outcomes. That's where I think the role of the instructional designer is really going to shift in the next few years, if it hasn't already. I mean, from what I'm seeing, the shift has already started, but we have to be training towards outcomes and towards performance.
I really dig that. And I want to share with you a really interesting teaching model I've seen recently. And it comes from implementing AI inside the curriculum. And I've seen this way of implementing it that's very new in the space. I've only seen one company doing it, and what's the biggest limitation of education? Online education, physical education has the same one big limitation, and it's that usually to be cost effective, education has to be done like one to many, one teacher to many students. And the problem with this is that it eliminates a big part of the students' desired outcomes, right? Because everyone has a different context, has different resources and different goals. So what this company did is they implemented an interview with an AI, and obviously they trained the AI on data about the curriculum and the professor's knowledge. And after the initial interview with the AI, the thing is, the whole like course structure had a lot of context about that specific student, and the AI was able to curate for them the exact resources that would be the most appropriate for their goals, for their resources, for their current context. So I think this is something that we are going to see a lot of in the educational space.
Yeah, I agree, Gabriel. I think what you're hitting on is the idea of the right learning to the right student at the right time, right? So this ultra personalization of knowledge delivery, I think there is a lot of potential for AI to do that. I've been exposed to a few different frameworks and technologies that claim that they can do that, but that is going to really radically revolutionize the way that knowledge is consumed. Because again, it's personalized. It's not a cookie cutter one to many, like you said. This is it knows who I am, it knows what I need, and it's going to give me what I need when I need it.
Yeah. Um, I'm curious, where are you allocating your efforts when it comes to exposure for Comidemy? How do you get in front of potential companies that can benefit from your services?
Yeah, that's a great a great question for a solopreneur to be able to kind of always think about in their day to day. Fundamentally, right now, most of my outreach is happening on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is the perfect ecosystem or the best ecosystem out there for other professionals, for companies, for teams that are within that ideal client profile for me to be able to reach out to. The work that I've been doing on my podcast, other posts and learnings that I am gleaning from the industry, I like to share those updates and the kind of the growth of the business and my journey on LinkedIn. I do think it must be said that the more you network and the more you build connections, both online and offline, those are boons to your business. So, right now I am overseas, but that hasn't stopped me from continuing to engage in as many virtual networking events as I can, getting the word out, talking to other professionals, talking to people that are in the space. Referrals are huge, so previous clients who are happy with my work, they're letting others know in their circle. So I would say it's a combination of LinkedIn outreach, very targeted, as well as networking that's also very purpose driven, and referrals. Those are the three. But I'm always open to new ideas because I know that it's a big world out there. So we have to be smart and nimble about how we get our word out there.
So, from what I understand, you do a combination of personal branding on LinkedIn and also cold outreach.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Amazing, amazing. And what's like the biggest bottleneck when it comes to LinkedIn? Because I know it's a good platform for especially for B2B marketing, but I also know it can give you some headaches. So what are you currently encountering on that side?
Sometimes it feels impersonal. I'll be totally honest. I think there's a lot of it's a professional social networking platform. So you want to put your best foot forward. You want to project confidence and, value in every interaction. But it may not always come across that way because it's again, we are multidimensional individuals, each and every one of us, right? So when we are projecting a very professional image that's maybe doctored or that's maybe created in some way that doesn't represent who we really are, it can feel a little fake, right? So that aspect of social media in general, I think, not to just harp on LinkedIn, but I like to in every interaction I like to present who I am genuinely. And I think the podcast and other ways that I've been able to really put my thoughts out there have helped me achieve that to some degree. And it's a work in progress. I have to continue to do that to fight against sounding impersonal or not as genuine as I could be, and really present my best self on a platform like that.
Yeah, I totally feel that. Sometimes scrolling through LinkedIn seems like you are in the hallways of a corporation, of a big corporate environment, and everyone's scared of HR.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's certain things you can and can't say, maybe, and we shouldn't necessarily have to feel that way in a social, open, kind of accepting place.
If you could like wave a magic wand and change one thing about not necessarily LinkedIn, but the way connecting with businesses work, what would that be?
Honestly, I think we should use more video and we should use more non-text based modalities to create
Okay.
connections. Yeah. We are visual beings. I mean, when you see somebody and you hear their voice and you can get a sense of who they are as an individual and how they think, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a video is probably worth a million. Right. We're talking exponentially more beneficial in terms of creating that value transfer between individuals. So I would love to see, the kind of I've noticed a couple of companies in their HR practices now, they're introducing video interviews or they're introducing some type of video modality in their hiring where you have to record a short 30-second spiel about who you are. Yes, that takes more time to do, right? Because you have to think about the script, you have to think about how you're going to present yourself, etc. But it's more genuine, right? You put in the effort and you get a better outcome. And I also think this is a little bit of a double-edged sword, but video makes it genuine by default because it's not somebody using ChatGPT to create a response to your text prompt, right? You get to see who they are and you get to hear their ums and where they make mistakes and if they stutter a little bit, right? It's what makes us human. So I think those modalities will help us a lot.
Yeah, this is very important, especially if you're talking about roles that kind of rely on communication. Like, okay, maybe if you want to hire like a very technical person, maybe the video aspect of it is not that important. But yeah, if it's somebody who has responsibilities that relate to communication, and especially if they are in a client-facing role, I think this is very important. And also what you mentioned about I think hiring good talent, it's becoming way more difficult. And I know a lot of companies take all these measures to kind of figure out if people fill in their applications using AI, but they are very easy to bypass. Like it's not a final solution, but the video one is a thing that I've also seen growing. And
Mm.
also like not only on applications like job applications, but the rise of personal brands is incredible. Like I feel like 10 years ago, it was very unusual for a company to have like a public face to represent them. And nowadays, every single company who's serious about their growth kind of associates face with it. And that comes with downsides as well, don't get me wrong. But I do see this trend where with the more ways we have to automate our stuff, people like to see stuff that's genuine, whether that's in terms of videos or maybe podcasts or maybe just a voice recording. People start to implement this human touches more and more, even if it's not the most efficient thing. So yeah, that's a very interesting perspective. So fast forward 1 year from now, where do you see Comidemy going?
So a year from now, I hope that I don't have to pivot my audience, number one, right? Because I think a year into the journey, learning what I did really informed where I can provide that value. I do want to stay on this particular track for some time longer than a year. And I want to actually a be a contributor to, I think, some of these technology driven innovations that are taking place in the industry, right? I want to move away from being a consultant, advisor, partner, which I am now, to really being in the driving seat or at least in the passenger seat of maybe some of these technologies that are shaping how we learn in the age of both human intelligence and artificial intelligence coming together. Emerging as maybe a voice that talks about these topics in a more profound way. Obviously, my experiences with my clients and elsewhere are going to influence how that comes about, but I want to understand more how to contribute to this growing narrative, if you will.
I think that's very realistic, to be honest. Like the natural growth way of consulting slash partnership companies I've seen over the past years was they get in the consulting business, maybe they get 10, 20 clients they work with, and they start to discover all these very niche problems, very specific problems that are not solved yet, but can be solved through technology. And yeah, the natural progression from partnership company or a consulting company, from my point of view, is to a SaaS company. Like you discover those problems and then you find a way to use technology to fix those problems and be able to provide the solution at scale. So I think what you're saying is very, very realistic. And based on what you told me about you and your experience, I think you're in a very, very good position to achieve that. Maybe in the next year, maybe in the next couple of years, but it's certainly gonna happen.
I appreciate the vote of confidence.
So, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before wrapping this up?
Yeah, I think honestly, we're all learners. I think learning is the common denominator to the human experience, right? I encourage listeners, I encourage everybody that I interact with, if I can, build a connection with them to really push the boundaries of their own understanding and, never stop questioning, right? Something comes to mind. Like the other day, I was trying to connect the dots. I'm a huge language nerd, so I like to connect the dots between different languages and the etymology of certain words and maybe where something comes up and something doesn't. At a whim now, our curiosities can be satiated, by going to any number of amazing platforms that are out there containing the entire body of human knowledge, right? Which is insane. Right. I read a newsletter the other day. I also subscribe to tons of newsletters, probably something I should cut down on to be able to save more time. But I read a newsletter the other day that said, I think the most expensive computer in the world in 1970 could process, I don't know, however many trillions of bits. And now the iPhone 16 can do like 35 times that processing power. And we all carry that in our pockets, right?
Yeah,
Or
it's
some,
crazy to think about it. Like, I've seen the same thing, but
yeah,
presented in a different manner.
yeah,
Your iPhone has more processing power than the computers they used to get us to the moon.
exactly, right? So
Yeah,
take that
that's crazy.
take that for what it is, right? I mean, we're living in an unprecedented era of human history. Satiate your curiosity with the technology and information that we have at our fingertips, literally. But don't lose the human touch, right? As best as we can, I keep reading about and thinking about, and even in my business, how do we bring that community connection to learning, right? That's what inspired the name of my company. We learn in communities, Comudemy. So I took the word community combined with the word academy, right? So don't learn in isolation. Keep asking questions, satiate the curiosity, but connect with one another as well, right? Don't lose sight of that human connection.
That's a very, very, very interesting insight because one of the recent episodes I filmed was with somebody who comes from the mental space and now is involved in the like AI ethics space,
Mm.
and they mentioned something very, very interesting. Apparently, pretty much everyone right now is more open to speak their problems and try to solve them with ChatGPT compared than a professional. Like, I know it feels good because you can open up without the danger of being judged, about your problems, whether they are personal problems or professional problems. I know it's easier to discuss them with the tech because it's tech and it just won't judge you back, right? But that's very limited. And the danger with that is that most of the times those AIs will kind of try to enable the beliefs you already have. Like if they have enough context about you, they will just try and tell you, yeah, this is good. What you're thinking is good. Continue like this. And that's not optimal for your growth, personal or professional. So yeah, connecting with people, I believe it's important. I don't know if it's the right word to use, but I believe it could become in the next 5 to 10 years. But human connection, I believe, will become a luxury.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong, man. I think in some contexts, human connection is already becoming so sought after. It's such a premium thing to have in someone's life, which, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I don't think anybody would have ever thought that that would be the case. So we need to pump the brakes in ways that will actually enable us to not lose some of those things that we require as a species, and I think connection and community and belonging, these are things that we fundamentally require to for our own wellness. One of the folks that I recently interviewed on my podcast, he also is in the mental health space actually, and we chatted a lot about these concepts, right? So, maybe the last thing that I can end on as a takeaway is technology is fantastic. I mean, I just praised how easy it is for us to get information, but we're not building for robots. Like we're not serving robots, right? We're serving humans. Whatever we end up doing, the technology, the knowledge, the super fast pace, evolution of all these things, it's to make our human lives better, right?
Absolutely.
If ChatGPT can save me 15 minutes writing an email, I want to spend those 15 minutes with my wife or with my friends, right? I want to be able to regain time back to build deeper connections. And if it's not achieving that, then what is the point, right? Technology should do the heavy lifting in ways that free up our time so we can express our human and creative energies more efficiently and in a more wholesome way.
I agree with you 100%. So yeah, fantastic insights, Farhan. You mentioned you also run a podcast. Yeah, tell us a bit about that, and how can people learn more about Comidemy and connect with you.
Yeah, thank you, Gabriel. This was an awesome chat. So, yeah, you can find out more about my podcast on my website, So my website is comudemy.com. I'm sure it's going to be in the show notes. My podcast is also called the Comidemy Podcast. You can find it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. The real reason behind a lot of the work that I do and the key like inspiration behind the podcast was let's bring people together who are building communities of learning, right? I have entrepreneurs, I have teachers, I have educators of many different stripes that come on, and some are using tech and some are not using tech, but they're all building communities in which learning is that common undercurrent. For me, I mean, I'm biased, but I think the conversations we have are really inspirational. Season 3 is going to launch soon. So the first 2 seasons are up. I'm taking a couple of weeks off in the summer. And then season 3 will launch soon, in which I'll try to bring on folks that are more on the corporate side and the team side to kind of help orient the audience towards, this new work that I'm doing.
Amazing. All of the links you mentioned will be found in the description of this video. So please go check Farhan out. He's building some really interesting stuff, especially if you run a small and medium business. I believe those resources will be very helpful for you. So again, thank you for taking the time to do this, and thank you guys for watching.
Thank you,
Bye.
Gabrielle. Take care.